Good morning, and please, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask, because I'm a little shy. Just a little bit about my background. Besides, working with the sheriff's office, I was the chief hostage negotiator for SWAT for 17 years, so I don't like talking, so understand that. Presently, I'm working on my doctorate, and I'm having a great time. I feel your pain out there. So, and I wanted to just introduce how I got involved with Florida Atlantic University. And about 2001, when Enron, WorldCom, and the rest of the issues were going on, I got a call from one of the doctors here, actually two of the doctors here, Dr. George Young and Dr. Carl Borgen. And they wanted to put together a program that would show the accountants that they had coming out what it was like on my side of the fence. And I got to tell you, when I first started, I found it to be very interesting, and I met with both of them, and I said, well, what do you want? Do you want a day's class? Do you want a week's class? Do you want 8 hours? And they kept on going on and on. And I said, no, we want a semester. And when we started the program, there wasn't a book on forensic accounting. There really was not a lot of information, up and coming field. And when I started the class in, I believe it was June or May of 2001, we would get the chapters of the book that we were using, and they would be sent to us as they were being released by the publisher, and we had the okay and have you. And I asked the class, I had an idea how we were going to run the class, and I asked the class what did they want out of the class, and what they wanted was reality. And I asked them reality from my reality, your reality, or what? They wanted the other side of fraud, what we saw, what I see, what I saw every day. I said, not a problem. And that's how we started the class. And eventually the program came around and what have you. And one of the first things that we did was, I was changing it every week based on what the students wanted. And for instance, one of the things we did was I brought in a case that, in fact, one of the gentlemen here today knows my old partner. And it was actually one of the first major identity theft cases in the country. We were the second largest at the time. New York had 6.4, and we had close to, I think it was $2 million in identity theft. And we worked the ring, and it turned out that the ring was, very interesting to work. In fact, John won't get upset, I'll use his name. John and I, the first day, worked 22 hours together. The first day, got search warrants, hit a house, and found all the items we were looking for. And we had worked this case for about 2 weeks solid. And what we eventually did was we wound up arresting 10 people. The main players wound up in federal prison. And we had a very interesting part of this because John, and with Secret Service agent Chris, we were working together one night, and we have photos of the people that we're looking at. The banks had given us the photos. So we're sitting there talking, and we bring in a couple other people. And as we're sitting there talking, and John and Chris and I are going through the photos of the people by the bank, and we look over, and I look at this one photo, and I look up, and the girl that came in, there were two women that came in. If I say girl, excuse me, but she came in to defend her friend. And I'm looking at her, and I'm like, okay, these are new glasses, all right? But heck, so I had two pictures where I show one to John and one to Chris, and they both look at me, and we have a 2-for-1. John goes, remember we were very close, he goes, I think we figured this one out. In fact, we did. After her defense, I took the picture and I showed it to her, and she says, what are you doing with a picture of me? And then John showed her another picture because he was looking, and then Chris shows her some. And she wound up singing about what she did. The opera didn't stop for about 5 hours. But what happened at that point in time was we then, for the federal government, we had to go through records. And that's where the importance, came in. We got a lot of the bank records we put together, which is, I enjoy it, spreadsheet after spreadsheet. You guys know what I'm talking about, and you got to check it 3 times to make sure that it's right, and then look at it again. And from that, we started to find more and more items that were taken. And as we went along, we built up on this case. And what I learned at that point in time, and I guess you don't think about it because prior I had worked money laundering and we knew who the people were and what have you, so it was just putting together the records. And I started to learn as I got in this case and then another case how important it was to kind of not only consume the records and understand the records, but the limitation of time I had to work the case. And realistically what happened was as I started to work cases, I started to adopt a different philosophy too. I mean, some of my investigations changed from this. And what I did was I started to look at cases in this respect. I knew that I could do the accounting work. I had no issues with it. But the problem that I faced was if I went into a company and they asked us to come in, you guys, a lot of you guys know accounting, how much time am I going to have to look at general ledgers? How much time am I going to have to look through all the invoices and what I have to do? So we adapted a style of understanding the person, you understand the fraud. Now, what does that mean? What we really did was we adopted Dr. Donald Creasy's thesis on the fraud triangle. Pressures, rationalization, and opportunity. Because remember, as a sergeant in charge of the economic crime unit, I couldn't stay on a case for 2 years. As CPAs, CFEs, your client's not going to give you 100 years to work the case. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, then keep them as a client, okay? But the fact was, we started to look at people, and then as we ruled out individuals, we could get the smaller amount of receipts, whatever we needed. And it became very easy for us to work the cases. So as we went on, what we did was we started to look at what do we need to work the cases, to get us the money, so to speak. And I had a civilian investigator working for me at the time who loved bank records. So we would get the bank records, she would put them together, and then we would go over them. And I also found another thing, and I always get this argument. I'm a fraud examiner. Okay, I'll tell you right up, I'm a fraud examiner. That's what I did for many years. That's my certification. Okay, but what I found was when I worked with many of the CPAs out in Broward County, they were having, and again, this is at the bottom portion. We're just starting where forensic accounting is getting hot. They were running into a situation where they're faced with the same situation I am. I know I have a client, but I know I can't stay. And I can't work 100 hours. So we started to get together and what could make it better, what can make it quicker. And as they went along, they started to adapt the attitude of let's start not only looking at the papers, but let's look at the people. And I think that was the beauty of taking, fraud examination and the CPA world and putting them together, hence forensic accounting. And it turned out that the more cases I worked with many of the CPAs, I didn't even have to ask them for a lot of things. It was provided. The banks then adapted the same attitude. They would stop and wait till we had suspects. And I'll give you, for instance, a bank account gets hit. They can look and see if there's pictures, but they're not sure if that's the individual. So instead of them collecting stuff, they waited till we got suspects and we narrowed it down. And what happened in essence was the beauty of forensic accounting was that, going back to my students, that I took that, brought that into the classroom. And what I found was, just like I found working with the CPAs, that many of the individuals, the CPAs that I was working with, and the students asked me about interviewing people. How would we interview people? So we broke the class up and we started to do interviewing. And I explained to my, would show them interviews and what we're looking for and what have you. And I was doing this with the CPAs that I was working with the forensic accounting side. And they were looking at, if you put it, real time issues. And it came down to where I was learning from them and they were learning from me. And I did a class, and some of the people that took my class, I'm on hiatus right now. I'm going for my doctorate, but I talk about body language in it. Why the importance in forensic accounting? Why the importance in fraud examination? Again, realize that once you're a forensic accountant or you're a fraud examiner, you only have so many years before you can get the case done. Actually, it's only a couple of months. You can't sit there and work on it forever. So the more you start understanding about the individuals, and the more you look at, I don't need to get all these general ledgers. I only need to get this stuff, okay? I need to get these receipts. And I don't need to get all the other stuff. You've narrowed your work time down. And that's what we started to create. So as we were doing the class, and the students were telling me what they wanted, the forensic accountants were telling me basically the same thing that the students were telling me. So that's what we worked on. And what happened was I had the opportunity to work a number of public corruption cases. And one of the cases that I worked, they knew that there was money missing. And the auditors went in, and I never pick on the auditors, believe me, because everybody else does. And it's not right. But the auditors went in, they knew there was a problem, they couldn't figure out what was going on. They knew it, they just didn't know where it was coming. And here's the difference in my side of the house in fraud examination. When they gave me the information, what I did was I said, there's another fund coming into this area. That's all it is. It's not on the books. And the argument ensued, how can you be so sure that it's happening? And I asked them a couple of questions, the auditors. How many years has your team been doing this? You've done surprise audits, you've never found anything. Therefore, there's an outside source that's never hitting the books, and that's where the money's going to. And it turned out that's exactly what happened. So what I'm saying to you is we learned from each other as we went along. And as we progressed in many of the cases, we found, how do you look at something? If I threw this case to you, and it's a very simple case. Some of my students spent hours defending the accounting profession, and I wanted just, how do you look at this? You have an individual that items are missing, an asset. Now listen to what I'm going to tell you. An asset or assets are missing. It's from a business, a major business down here. The assets are missing. You have 125 people who work for this company. This is an actual case. My students know it. 125 people. And I'm going to give you what I got. There was a time clock for these individuals, and it was an engineering architectural firm, and they know assets are missing, and I'll give you the assets. It's cash, $338,000, or $238,000 rather. Where'd it go? And that's what I got from this case. And I threw that out to the students, and I said, where'd it go? Think about where's the first thing that you think you're going to look for? Auditors have been in, and I will tell you this, they have checked ID cards. They have checked and went to the sites. I'm giving you a lot more than I gave my student. Okay? They have checked sites. They have went and physically checked the ID cards. They're gone. The money's gone. Where'd it go? Now, most people, if they were going to look into that, would go towards the books. We had auditors come in. Can we agree on this? They checked everybody's card. Okay? There was a little picture. Check. There's no picture here. And it all worked out. It's kind of a dead end, right? No ghost employee. All right? Everybody's working. People punch in a time card. Everybody's showing in. So where did the assets go? Where are you going to go, folks? What are you going to collect? Start thinking like a forensic accountant. Start thinking like a fraud examiner. The parking lot?
Look for cars there.
Look for cars? Okay, there's cars there. So what?
Who has good cars?
Who has good cars? Maybe. All right. Remember, there's key words I'm telling you that you got to look at. This is forensic accounting, folks. I know it's very difficult for you guys to like even say it. This is forensic accounting and fraud examination. So what do you look at? Well, hell, it's an assignment. You got to say something. Just defend the accounting profession for me. Do something. You all know how to talk in here, right? So what do you look for? If you're the accountant, what would you look for? Journal entries. What else? Everybody is accounted for, but they're missing $238,000, and on top of that, all the work is done. Say again? The books are being cooked? No, they're good. An outside person.
Somebody that doesn't necessarily work for the company?
But how would they get into there?
Somebody that does work for the company?
Somebody, okay, well, it is either somebody that does or doesn't. Somebody that does work for the company. Look at the personal, but then you got to subpoena 125. I'll tell you what I asked for, so you know. I asked for new people within the last year who came and who left. I asked for copies of the backs, front and backs of their checks. Anybody know why? Only, I said for, you don't even have to go back here, go back 8 months forward.
Exactly. Their bank accounts that they were depositing money into.
Well, they're writing the check. They're writing the check out, okay, to their vendors.
Signatures,
But come on, a little bit further.
signatures, even when
You're-
you try to deviate.
You're right there, but you're close. Okay, we're going to use an example. Everybody knows GE, they bring good things to life, okay? When I'm going through the checks, you're very close. Kudos to you. The GE check, one of the GE checks that is 8 months old, is handwritten. Now, folks, I'm going to ask you this. Like for you guys in Florida here that have FP&L, when the heck is the last time FP&L, if you were sending them a check, somebody wrote FP&L? Now, to my brothers in the FBI, they call that a clue, okay? So what I did was, I have GE, again, made up name, not the real GE. I have GE, I now have what we at the sheriff's office called a lead. And I went and asked who the individual was on this account. Actually, I called because I didn't want to, I had jelly donuts there, and they're the most healthiest donut for you. Remember that. It's got fruit, jelly. So you got to get that in the morning. So, you know, I called, and they said it came back to so-and-so. Okay? Really? So I had to leave the donut here because my screen was over here. I typed into sunbiz.org and found out who the corporation was registered to. And then I had a list of employees, and I had the last name, and the last name matched up to one of the people on the list. Again, that's how simple it was. And then I turned around and went to one of the sites where this guy was working just to see if in fact they were working. And they were. And then I went to the place of business. I did this between my jelly donut, I finished that up, and lunch. And then when I walked into the place, I think I was having a bad hair day that day, because the woman saw me and she started to cry. I mean, I'm not pleasant to look at all day, but not right away, you know. That's how quick the case was solved, if you know where to look. Okay, and that's the key to forensic accounting. If you know where to go, you cut down all the hours. Now, eventually what I found out was that time clock was an electronic time clock. It was done on the computer. Turned out that this was an engineering architectural firm, that if you were an engineer architect, you would just, when you punched in your computer and came on, you went into their system. That's what they considered. The individual that they had was a family member of the company. She set up their, not only did she run HR and their accounting and computer system, she ran about everything. And all I said to her was, who is this individual? Okay. She goes, these are people that work for her. She wouldn't admit it first. So I left, and I took the 10 names that they had, and I narrowed them down to 5, and I called somebody the next morning, and because I had to go to a guy that wanted to jump off of a bridge, so I had to stop and talk to him. He wasn't a forensic accountant, though, okay? So, and then what I did was I started making a couple more phone calls, and it was 8:30 here, and I called California, and you know, when you, like, the phone rings in the middle of the night, 5:30 in the morning there, and the phone falls, and I hear, hello, and I go, hi, how you doing? This is Sergeant Leiner from the Sheriff's Office. How you doing? Because I've had 19 cups of coffee already, and I'm ready to talk to you. And she goes, can I call you back in, like, you know, a half hour? I got to wake up, have a cup of coffee. I said, absolutely, okay. So all I did was, like, because I had all that caffeine, I walked up and down, you know, the hallway till the phone rang, okay? And then I picked up the phone, and she said, hi, how you doing? She goes, what's going on? I said, how long ago did you leave so-and-so? And she goes, I left about a year ago. I said, really? Who'd you turn your stuff into? And she tells me the name. And she goes, but I am coming back. I'm going to reapply. I said, well, not right now, because, you know, that wouldn't be good, because you're not really here. But you are here because you're getting paid. And she said, what? She goes, you know, I thought something was wrong because I got something from the IRS, you know, that I didn't include this income. And I didn't know what to do. So I'm still talking with them. I said, well, I think that we're going to be able to work that out too. Okay. When I went back in that morning, not only did the woman cry, but she told me the whole story. Sir?
Did she ever tell you why?
Yes. She told me, and that was kind of the key. And remember this, the other part of being a forensic accountant, fraud examiner is, you've got to help the persons fix the problem. And one of the issues you're going to ask in your interview is, tell me why you did it. When you look at Creasy's fraud triangle, pressures, rationalization, opportunity, you're finding out what goes on. So she turned around and she said, if you don't think this woman had any pressures, I'll give them to you. She just bought a new home. She recently had a baby. Her husband recently started the company because he became a master electrician. And she was starting a uniform store because Broward County was, if some of you from Broward County remember, they were talking about going to uniforms in Broward County. So she was going to, get in early, and she was concerned how she would get by. And that's why she did it. And what we did was we sat down with the individuals of the owners of the company, and we said, look, I asked them these questions. How many times a year you give bonuses? They go twice. I'm sorry, once. I said, well, why don't you do it twice a year? Have like a Christmas in July. And they said, well, why would we want to do that? I said, well, if you do the Christmas in July and you give somebody a bonus and they have their ID card and the picture matches them, you'll never have the problem that you just had, where somebody went to the site and impersonated this woman who's out in California. And everybody loves getting money twice a year, okay? And I said, and the other thing is, you're a great company and you let your architects and engineer come and go as they want. Why don't you once a month, and all of them live in Fort Lauderdale, but they could be in Alabama, Georgia, all over the place. Why don't you maybe once a month or once every month have a meeting here on Friday? Nobody's going to argue if they got to come back in early Friday and get off early, right? And that was the beauty of it. This company, to tell you, they've been around many years. They cared about their people. They did not want to get into micromanaging. So what they even had a daycare set up for their employees, which was right next door. So if mom and dad were there, they could go next door and take a look at the kids and go, still there. Okay, thank goodness I don't have to change that diaper. Okay, bye. So, but the fact is, all these little things you also have to put into play, because now you're helping the people. It's not just, oh, we found the problem. Now it's how do we fix the problem. And during that time when you're doing this as the forensic accounting or fraud examiner or whatever you want to be, you're learning. You're learning. You should be learning. Don't go in there with the attitude that you're always right. Heck, I know I'm never right, so I'm good with that. And especially now going back to school after I get some of these papers back, I know I'm definitely not right. But the fact is, when you do this, as you become an accountant, as you become the CPAs, you're going to have to start lowering the amount of paperwork that you do when you go through if you're handling frauds. Frauds are the easiest thing in the world to work. And I mean this seriously. They're the easiest thing in the world to work once you know who you're going after. Sir.
Just out of curiosity, Jay, did this company press charges against a woman?
Yeah, we went back and forth on that, and there was another part to that. She was related to some of the owners, so she's still working for the company, but not in that capacity. But what they did was, as part of the agreement, they own part of the store, which is doing okay. They own part of the company, his company, and he's been doing very well too. So unfortunately, when I was working and going to court, I don't care about what happens. I don't care if they get a weekend, in a Holiday Inn as far as their punishment. The fact is, there's something very important, and I bring this up with many of my classes. When you go through this and you become a forensic accountant, you are, in essence, an arm of the legal system. And I want you to understand this. You cannot get tunnel vision. You cannot think that you know who it is. For many years I had the power, and it's a very powerful thing. One was subpoena power, and the other one, which is probably more important, was to take a person's freedom away from them. As forensic accountants, remember, what you say and what you do will lead to somebody getting arrested, taking their freedom away. And folks, that's a very, very powerful thing. I mean, think about it. You get handcuffed, you get brought down to the Broward County Jail, you got a bond out, now you got a record. This isn't something we take lightly. So I will tell you this. as an individual on the other side in law enforcement who worked these cases, I would do my own investigation based on your investigation, what you found, but I would do my own investigation. And oftentimes, I would find different things, and we would sit down and we would go over it. I can tell you we worked a case where the forensic accountant for I have to be politically correct, for this business, told me what they had the amount. I agreed wholeheartedly on the suspect, and we were a penny off in what the amount was taken. Now, everybody go, penny, come on. Well, think about that for a second. I'm going to go in front of a judge and jury. Who's lying, me or him? So you've got to, or I had to work very closely with the CPAs and the forensic accountants. When you do the work and you get involved in it, what you see is it becomes very enjoyable. It's a lengthy, very lengthy process, and you go through things that you go, I'm going to look at this individual, I'm going to look at this individual. Why do these individuals not fit? And a key to this too is, and it's interesting because many of the people that I worked with that are CPAs that went into the forensic accounting field, and a lot of the students here that were my students are working for these companies and they're doing forensic accounting. They call me and they say, you know, they call me professor. I'm expecting the old, well, I guess I am the old guy, but with the jacket and the little velvet sleeves and the pipe, okay? And they go, I have an issue here I want to talk to you about. And I went, well, go ahead. Well, I've been doing a little comparison, and I found out that two of the people are, I know you guys will find this shocking, expanding on their expense reports. And I said, well, what brought you to this? She said, you know, I noticed that I started doing a comparison, and she went into some of the forms that she had to do and what have you, and she goes, and I noticed something wasn't right. She goes, you know, and then I tested it, and I went to Tampa, for instance, and I came back, and I stayed at the same hotel, and suddenly what I paid didn't add up to what they paid. But I don't know what to do. And I said to her, well, what do you mean you don't know what to do? She goes, well, one of them is my boss, and I just don't know what to do. And I said, you've got to make, I'm not making that decision for you. She said, you know, I looked at him and I thought to myself, you've worked here and you must have been cheating the company all along. She goes, so I did what you said. I went back about 5 years and got everything, and I started looking at it. She goes, and I just went to those records. And I said, well, perhaps I taught you too well then, you know, that it's driving you crazy now, because what is your heart saying? She goes, I'm going to write it up and send it in. And she did. And wound up that they let the guy go, and with an agreement that they pay back. But you see, it's when it's a mindset, folks, and I think that's the key, that no matter what you work, you have to have a mindset. It's like working undercover narcotics, and I tell this to people. You can't, if you're going to buy narcotics as a cop, please don't do this at home. I'm not saying to do this. But you can't go in there with a mindset that you're a cop. If you're going to work fraud as a forensic accountant, you have to think like that individual does. And that's what I'm suggesting to you. You know, I again go back to my old partner, John. We used to sit there and bounce ideas off each other. We'd be on a surveillance and kind of talk about stuff and what was going on. And he said, well, you know, we did something wrong. And I said, what's that? He goes, we didn't get enough food. Okay. I said, you're right. So we'll have to get more food to talk about this. It always comes back to food because I'm a fat guy. I like food. But the fact is, you can't do everything by yourself. And that's what I think I loved about working in the fraud area. You can sit there, you can look at cases, but you need somebody also to look at it too, because a lot of times you'll get tunnel vision. And I use this case. There's going to be cases that are going to open up your mind. There's going to be cases that you're going to have to learn different cultures. I will tell you that we had a major identity theft case. And I tell this to my students. This is when identity theft was getting really hot, and it started. I got a report. A woman from California went to check and get a new mortgage. Her banker told her that she couldn't have the mortgage because she already owned homes in Fort Lauderdale area. She never has been to Fort Lauderdale. It's a 3-line report that I get. We have no idea. We get the report, and off we go. And we go to the address, the first address that's listed. Nobody's there. Okay. And I said to John, let's run a complete history on this house. Realtor, the bank, blah, 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 we go down. And anybody know why I do that? What I'm looking for? Sir?
Because someone had to sign those documents at the closing table. And they have copies of the driver's license. And the realtor, if it's real, and they also, at least the picture's going to be correct, you hope. Then you also have the realtor was involved, and it could be that the realtor was involved in one of those transactions. Chances are, if he's fraudulent, he's going to be involved in many other of those transactions.
And see what you've done, says the deputy assistant property appraiser. What you've done is, but again, narrowing it down. So now I have a realtor's name. I already know that the person who bought the house is fake. Unfortunately, the licenses that they made copies of, you couldn't see. And then we go to another house, and same person, I can tell the same person because it's a head. So it's a person. The second one, we find the realtor. So now I have somebody in common. I don't want to talk to the realtor yet because the realtor's probably involved in it, correct? So we figure we're going to surveil that individual. But before we do that, we also have working with us the Postal Inspection Service and the Secret Service. And because I was on many task force. And what happens is we get a call from one of my friends in Plantation, and he says, hey, does this name ring a bell? And he gives me the name, and I said, I got a couple of houses bought under that name. So he says, good, I don't have to work the case. I'm sending it over to you. It's a stolen car out of Plantation Ford. And I went, thank you very much. You don't want to know the rest of the conversation. I told him to have a nice day. And we do the surveillance, and we watch the individual. And we see him go home. He comes to the office. He then leaves the office. He goes and meets a man at a hotel. They're in there, and we look like we're tourists with the camera in our car, okay? And about an hour later, they come out, give each other a hug, off they go, all right? And we do a little bit more. Now we're looking for the car, and dumb luck, because we're going back to the house in one of the cities, there's the car we're looking for. So we don't want to pull it over yet. We want to see where it's going. We follow it to Miramar, and then we follow it to this card company in Plantation, Florida. And the individual gets out. It's a big building. Not going to mention the name of it. They have credit cards. And they go in there for 8 hours. Then they come out, they get back in the car, they go back to the house. We then watch them, they go to another house. All I can tell you is, thank God, in the middle of this, John and I stopped for jelly donuts, so we were keeping probably, the good fruit all day. And we get another house that we didn't even know about yet, because it hadn't hit any of the records yet. So we turn around and we decide, that we're going to stop the car, but we're going to wait a day. And we turn around the following day, we stop the car away from the house because we don't want to see it. And we have a marked unit stop the car, it's stolen car, blah, 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 so we don't even have to get involved. And we go to question the individual on what they're doing with the car, the identity, and the person says that they got it from so-and-so. And they're being truthful in the fact that they did get it for the individual. They're saying they described the individual. We pull up a picture of the individual, and it turns out that's who the houses are bought under. That's who the car's bought under. And it's the same name as my victim in California. The only difference is my victim in California is a female rather, and my suspect in Fort Lauderdale is a male who is in transitioning into a female. So now we have to follow these individuals. And we go to the various clubs in Broward and Miami. And I'm going to tell you folks, this is what I mean about learning a different culture. These were transvestites. It was a group of transvestites, plain and simple. But I found that when you go talk to certain cultures, as in this case, when the guy is dressed as a woman, they're dressed as the woman, whatever name they use. I learned more about transvestites than any one man knows. In fact, somebody in this room one day, who's a sergeant with the sheriff's office, calls me up and says, hey, there's a transvestite walking down east on Broward Boulevard. Do you know him? And I did. But not in that way. I mean, okay. So what I'm saying to you was, for me, it was a learning experience. I kept on learning. Now, eventually we do get the whole group. We have to now do the loss. And that's where, we have to get the records. But the way that we really broke this case wide open was we brought the realtor in. And his wife wanted to come with him. And I was like, well, I'm not going to really argue this point because I think she might help us. And we were talking. He wasn't under arrest. We kind of invited him in. And I opened up the first folio and showed him. And then I opened up the next one, showed him. And he's denying everything that, well, no, that was probably somebody there. And I said, well, we've been watching you for a little bit. And I had the pictures turned over so they couldn't see them. And I said, we've been watching you, and I will let you know that we know where you got the information from, because we had also been watching. It started, the person that he was with happened to be somebody who worked for a bank that was in charge of their data processing and was supposed to shred everything and did not shred it, took a bag for me and a bag for the garbage can. And they left the bag out, and these other guys would come and pick up the bag of mortgage applications that were not, shredded. So I said, all I said was, well, we have you going to a motel. And, I mean, we have you meeting with an individual who's involved in this. And what do you think the wife thought? An affair. Well, I guess it was, but it wasn't what she thought. Okay? Which, no issues, I'm just saying. And he's like shaking his head. And he puts his hand on the picture. Like, please don't show the picture. And she starts yelling at him. We asked her to leave. And he explained the whole situation to us. Okay? And she came back, she was waiting for him outside, and she I want to know who that woman is. And I went, I can't say, ma'am. Okay? You can rest assured it's been taken care of. They're not seeing each other anymore. Okay? This woman that he saw, he's not saying, how was that for, like, you know. But the fact was, now we go back into the records. And what I'm going to say to you is that when we went back in, it was easy for us to get the records that we needed to show that these guys had taken X amount of dollars. Okay? Again, going back to building it first, who the individuals are. And I think what I love about, like, working in the area of fraud and even forensic accounting is it is still so new. There's so much to learn, and it's fun. Yes, sir.
In the transvestite case, did anybody go to jail?
They all went to jail. We arrested, I can tell you that I think 16, 15 went to federal prison, and another 20 or 30 went to state. Okay? So, yeah. Sir.
Now, was there mortgage fraud as well involved
There
in
was
that?
mortgage fraud, there was wire fraud, there was bank fraud, you name it, okay? And it was so interesting that we had a couple of guys from the Secret Service working with us, and I always tell the story to my class, so I'll tell it to you guys. One of the agents was brand new. He's up in Washington now. He's on the Electronic Crimes Task Force. So when President Obama, let's say, flies to, I don't know where he went recently, but let's say even if he goes to Hawaii to vacation, what Brad does is he goes there first and sweeps the place and makes sure that there's no bugs. And there's only, I think there's 12 of these teams in the country, and he's part of it. But he is a very tall, good-looking, blonde-haired guy, and the individual that I was dealing with was half female upstairs and male downstairs. And he was in love with Brad and told Brad that he wanted to have his baby. And I had to explain to him that was impossible. Okay, but, you know, maybe you guys could adopt, I don't know, you know. And when we talked to him we were holding him in the North Broward facility, he flashed Brad, okay, and I had to go in and explain, we're going to talk to you, it's not a show, okay. He still has nightmares about it, but it was easy for him to kid around because we were sitting there one day in the office, and he says, it was his mother that called, and he's from the South, and she says, Mama, how you doing? And she goes, good. And she goes, so are you guarding the president? He said, no, Mama. She said, well, what are you working? And he said, transvestites. And she goes, what's that? He goes, well, that's where men dress up as women. And all she said was, Brad, honey, you need to come home. Okay. So, you know, but the fact is, the work that we did on that case shut down a major mortgage ring and what have you. And I would tell you this, when you do the cases right and you do them honestly and upfront, you never really go to trial. I can tell you I probably went to a handful of trials. And, you know, for me, instructing here, they didn't want to put me on the stand. I went to one trial, and, you know, having co-authored the book with Dr. Hopwood and Dr. Young, and the defense didn't know that, and they got a little snotty, and they said, so, Sergeant, you want to tell us how you did this, what's your background? And the judge even stopped and had the jury leave and said, look, here's his book, and this is his education. Do your homework before you bring him up here. And the guy stood up and asked if he could plead out, okay? So I was kind of wanting to say, you know, like, well, I teach at Florida Atlantic University, blah, 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 you know, okay? And then I wouldn't be able to get off the stand because I'd have to, like, you know, all right? But they wouldn't let me do that, you know? But what I found was that the students that, you know, and I stay in touch with many of the students, it isn't cocky, it's they feel good about what they learn. You know, and the thing is, you know, when you have students call you and they're actively working and they're talking about the cases and they're going, look, you know, this is what I did and you guys were talking, and I used this interview technique and it worked. And one of the gentlemen just sent me, he's working for the state auditor's department, and he goes, I used that technique you talked about. He goes, and I almost fell off the chair because the guy bit right into it, and blah, 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 blah. And I went, good, congratulations, you know. And I think, like I said, the beauty for me was I was learning from the CPAs. And it became more of an enjoyment, more of a passion. And when you look at forensic accounting, in 90-something% of the cases, you're going to know who the individual is. It's knowing where to go to. It's knowing what to ask. And it's knowing how to fix it. And that really is the key. And as you get this, as you progress in your careers, what you'll see is that, wow, it's that much easier for me. I understand it better. And I think what I've seen from the cases that I've worked is, you know, I'm a big proponent of the fraud triangle. I brought it up earlier. Every case, every crime that there is, you can kind of use it. It doesn't just have to be fraud. Everybody has precious rationalization opportunities. The difference is that white-collar criminals are much better at neutralizing their thoughts. They did not commit the crime. They do not believe that what they did was wrong. And the key then is using that in the interview. If you truly understand fraud and you truly understand the fraudster, you'll know how to talk to them. And that's, I think, what the beauty where we kind of like worked on as the years progressed here. We were able to throw that in. I know that, if I may, can I say this about eventually the interviewing? You know, we're in the process of putting together you know, for accountants, for forensic accountants, an interview process, you know, straight up front. And what happens is, it's more than just walking in and saying, like it is on TV, I know you did it, this is the way, and you better tell me. That isn't the way it works, folks. That's not it looks good on TV, and dang it, I want to know how, what is it, I always say, what is it, I always say SUV, SVU, you know, whatever it is, they literally do it in 29 seconds, okay? I had to wait 6 weeks to get a subpoena. In fact, when we started the program, Dr. Young and I got called by Special Victims Unit, one of the producers, and we spoke to them, and they asked us, well, how do you guys work forensic accounting? So we told them. And he's arguing with me on the phone. He goes, well, we can't wait 6 weeks. I mean, we have to, you know, I'm sorry, that's the way it goes if you're subpoenaing stuff, you know. And the thing is, when you look at all this stuff, when you go through it, the enjoyment for me is I love the interview process. I love the body language that people show off, okay? You all did it this morning with your body language when you first came in. You were all like, I'm here, I know I'm here, but I'm not going to talk to that one over there. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. You all send off body language. And that's part of the things of learning to be a forensic accountant, learning to look at people a little bit differently. It is a lot about the numbers, and I know the CPAs will kill me in this room, but it also is a lot on a thought process. How you look at people, how they react to you. I asked this gentleman if he wanted a drink of water. He almost passed out. I went, a little nervous, are you, huh? And then it looked like he was, you know, raining, okay? But you also have to know, if you're working with somebody, their body language. I used to, in fact, I tell this to my class, we were working this individual, they had stolen some money, and this is kind of talking about body language. The individual that came with me this morning was my partner in narcotics and worked with me many years before I worked with John. And I'm interviewing this person, and she comes in, and I'd been interviewing for about an hour and a half, 2 hours or so. She comes in, she has a pad, and it's key how you sit. Second interview always sits off to the side because you don't want them to draw the attention. She writes something down, and she hands me the pad, and I just pick it up, and I look, and I take my pen out, and I write something, and I ask him a question, and I give her back. She writes something else, After he answers, I write something down. I ask the guy a question. She just goes like this, and she leaves. The guy right after that says to me, she knows I did it. And he confesses.
We're probably asking about lunch, right?
That's exactly what we're asking. She said to me, where do you want to go for lunch? I said Italian. She goes, what time? I said, probably about 11:30, quarter to 12. So I said, after he confessed, I said, no, that's not what, she really doesn't, she wasn't even watching it. Oh, no, she knew everything, blah, blah, blah. I asked her to bring the pad, and I showed him. He looks at me, he goes, I confessed to where you guys were having Italian? He goes, really? And I said, well, look, body language. She just came in, very stoic, said what she had to say, and left. But she wrote it down, didn't interrupt. And see, these are all things as you learn them as you get more familiar with stuff. I've worked a number of cases. Probably recently, one of the most interesting ones was we were working the tax fraud cases, and I'll tell you, I was sworn in as a IRS agent. I lost all my friends anyway, but and they said that's an IRS joke. Okay, I mean, stay with it. But they still couldn't talk. The IRS agents still couldn't talk to us about the case. Like that was just something in the code. So we're interviewing this guy that we got on, President's Day, like a year and a half ago. And the guy gives me a name. And this is who he's been dealing with. And he puts his head down. He goes, I'm in a lot more trouble than you guys know about. I'm just sitting there looking at him. And he goes, this guy's a major player, and he goes through the whole thing. And I'm like, okay, and he starts to, I haven't even asked him like another question because he's like keeps on going on and on. And he tells me how he's doing this, and he gives me more information, and we're recording it so I didn't have to write it down. And he goes on, and I'm just sitting there for about an hour. I don't know where I drifted to, okay, because I figured I'd watch what he said. And I said, do you want to tell us anything else? Just don't go to my hotel room because I left the computer there. I said, well, the computer we got with you, what's that? Oh, well, that's one that I use in Texas. The one in the hotel room, I paid, I'm going out there and I'm going to be back, is the one I use in Florida. I said, so you took the computer from Texas here? Yeah, I didn't want anybody to steal it because I don't trust the guys that I'm working with out in Texas. Okay, so we went back, we got his consent, we went in, got the computer. Sure enough, we had a search warrant on it, and sure enough, he had all this information. So we go meet, because we're bringing in the CI, criminal informant, to the IRS, and he's our CI. There's another guy that we're bringing in, but this individual that we just spoke to gave me a name. And I happened to mention the individual's name, and the body language from the agents in the IRS, when your jaw drops and you kind of like, how the hell did you know that name? Well, that's what happened, body language. So we waited, and after CI was done, and I said to one of the guys, so that's the guy you must have been working that you believe is at the top, and you don't have to say anything, and here's all the information, here's the guy's stuff, okay? And they said, well, now we can, we got to call the U.S. attorney. The U.S. attorney approved it, and they could read me into it, okay? But they weren't even sure. They've been watching the guy. They had no information. They wound up indicting the guy and about 30 other people for identity theft here. Body language plays a role, too, in all of this. Sir.
Jay, we have a question from Jim. He's asked, what certification would you recommend someone to have in order to be more marketable as a forensic accountant?
This thing, they call it the CPA, is great. The CFE, Certified Fraud Examiner, and there's a Certified Fraud Specialist. And You know, I've learned this from going to school and from Dr. Hopwood. Start writing some articles in your field, even if you send it to Trade Magazine. Um, you know, those are probably some of the best. They're the most respected. I think that would be the key. Don't, and I say this to everybody in all honesty. You might be going for your master's here. Keep on going. Keep on learning, folks. Because I'm going to tell you something. I'm not stopping. I want to go for my doctorate. I'm going to complete that. I'm going to go back and take some more courses. I know I'm a glutton for punishment, but I've talked to Dr. Hopwood about it, and he said absolutely. And the thing is, keep on going, keep on learning. The beauty about this is that this every day now is evolving. Every day. I can tell you, having worked fraud from not the inception of the computer or the internet, like Al Gore, I think, said that. All right, I didn't make the internet up. All right, but the fact is, since the desktop publishing came around, I can tell you that fraud is not only very cyclical, it is cyclical. When we first started working, we worked this group called Felony Lane. They were distraction thefts. That's how they started out. An individual, this is a closed case. I can talk to you about it if I have the time. If not, just tell me to be quiet. But basically, there was an individual. She is still in federal prison, Janice Coachman. She was the queen of Felony Lane. She started off with distraction thefts. They started taking the checks. They would write them out. As the computer came along, now became, we can type it up. As the scanners came in, we can scan it in, okay? Then as we progressed, it got to the point where you thought they would have kept on scanning in the checks. Well, that became counterfeiting. Now they went back down to going back to washing checks, and it's cyclical. So you watch people who go through fraud. Once you start understanding it and you get a better grasp on it, it becomes very easy to work if you know where you're going again. In Felony Lane, we indicted 46 federally, and we must have arrested over 300. And that was Coral Springs, the Sheriff's Office, the Secret Service, Fort Lauderdale, Pembroke Pines. We worked on it for a number of years. And we had a gentleman from the Secret Service who retired, a gentleman by the name of Al Lowe, led the task force. And all I can tell you is we were very busy and we made a lot of arrests. And we started to teach people around the country what to look for, how to look for. And what we needed at that point in time was the bankers to help us build up all the loss. See, in interviewing, when you ask a person, normally fraudsters, they have no idea what they stole. And when a person tells you in the interview that when you talk to her, well, we were writing checks for $2,000, we were doing maybe 10 a day, I don't know, 5, 10 a day, how many banks? They're getting a lot of money. Now you got to recreate all that money. And that's what you need to try them. Nobody went to trial, they all pled out. But the fact is, you're taking both areas, you're putting them together, you become that much stronger. That really is the beauty. And this is what I found from the students that I talked to. And they said this to me. I garnered the ability to take my accounting that I learned and the thought of fraud, and I put them together. And it became one discipline. And we'll get arguments all the time from the CPAs, the International Association of CPAs, and the Certified Fraud Examiners. They are two separate areas. But when you put them together, folks, that's power. You understand how to work fraud, and you have the ability to be a forensic accountant. There's a lot of power behind that. And let me tell you something. When you go on the stand, even if you never make it to the stand, what I mean by that is they have a tendency to plead out. So I enjoy that I had the opportunity to work a lot of these cases. I could go on all day and tell you about cases, but you'd probably be sleeping by the time I get done. But the fact is, there's power to this. This is one of the hottest jobs around. I'm retired, and a couple of CPAs now want me to come to work with them. I don't like the word work anymore, okay? I just recently retired after like 35 years of what I call being institutionalized. I like the idea that, like this morning when I was coming here, I was like, I have to be up at what time? Okay, but the fact is, you know, I found even for me, there's a very big area that I can go to. My ultimate goal is to finish up my degree, come back, and you know, start teaching again. And I'll probably do some more work with, you know, the accountants in Homeland Security. And I guess what I'm saying to you is, it's not just the accounting field where you can get a job. It's amazing what's out there. And it's amazing. We've had people in the program, so you know, that were FBI agents, that were judges. I still think one of the people in my class was with the CIA, okay? But, you know, I'm telling you, but, you know, we've had judges, and one of the judges wanted me to come up and talk in Jacksonville, and I figured out what time I'd have to be up to talk to him, and I went, no, you know. But the fact is, you know, we're talking about people that have already been through this, and they're coming back. And the key that I learned from everybody is, don't stop on your education, folks. It's powerful. Sir.
Yeah, I was interested. You're doing some work in Homeland Security, and you know, just maybe talk whatever you can about the fraud and Homeland Security.
Well, you know, here's the thing. When you get involved in the fraud, depending on where you're at with Homeland Security, right now, and I will tell you this, and I have to be very generic about this, but right now, there is a big push for CPAs, for forensic accountants, and I don't think I need to explain to you why, but I will tell you that a number of our students here are what's called, they're analysts, but one of them, I believe Jim, is a major in the Air Force or the Army, or colonel now, but he also works for the FBI in Miami as an analyst. He runs all the analysts. And Nicola, they're all CPAs down there in their field, and they work very sensitive cases. We had a gentleman here that, actually a couple of the FBI guys worked on the Rothstein case. You know, some of them were working terrorism, so it depends what area you hit in Homeland Security and what you do. And also, they look at the background of people, like, you know, the education and what have you. So that's kind of the key. The judges, in fact, were coming back. Why? Because they're attorneys, and they wanted to get the feel for the forensic accounting area, where I'm an attorney now, but I know I can go into, if I hook up with a CPA, or I'm going to be the CPA. So I have both of them. And it's a wide open field. I mean, it really is. I've been asked to go work a couple of places, and I'm just being frank with you guys. I don't want to work. I mean, you know, I like, you know, that I get up in the morning and I go to breakfast and I go to school and do my schoolwork and come home before traffic is done. And, you know, now I know what the early bird specials are all about, you know. Okay, but the fact is, the field for me, I love the field. I just don't say that. I loved what I did. I had the opportunity to work something that, as a cop, most cops don't want to work that. They don't care to work it. I can tell you, when I was hurt many years ago, and I had to make a decision what I was going to do, and part of it, I went back for my accounting degree. I never went for the CPA because I couldn't spell CPA. So I figured it wasn't for me. It was like when they asked me to go into IA and I spelled it wrong. I put EYE and then EH. So I said, well, that's not for me either. But I have to tell you, I have been very fortunate in the fact, and I'm not just saying this, I've already told this to Dr. Hopwood and some of the other guys. I have the opportunity, and I still have the opportunity to teach here. I have the opportunity to watch this field grow from now the other side. And I'll tell you what, people often say, would you go back to work fraud? Not in the same capacity. And why? Because I had 35 years of law enforcement was enough. When I knew how to spell sheriff, I knew it was time to leave. Okay? So, and that's what I'm saying. It's a great field. It's growing. You look at some of the hottest jobs, it's for forensic accounting. It's not going to stop, folks, because I hate to tell you this, fraud is increasing, and it's getting bigger and bigger. So you're going to need guys like you. You know, so think about it. I mean, that's something that what do you want to do? Don't give up on education. That's all I'm saying to you. I'm a lot older than a lot of you guys, and I'm still going, and I'm going to continue going. And I'll probably get back into the field of fraud on more of, as I call the civilian side. You know, I know Chicken wants me to come there. You know, he's asked me if I wanted to work there. I don't want that 9 to 5. I sound like Dolly Parton on 9 to 5, but it's a great field, folks. That's all I can tell you. I loved it. I still love it. I have a passion for it. I can tell you that when it's putting a puzzle together, and if you like putting a puzzle together, you'll love this field. And what happens is you kind of like suddenly, I have to tell you this, I worked a case for like 18 months, and when John was in another unit, he used to come over. I had all these boxes around my cubicle, and I looked like a chipmunk. I'd come out, and he would feed, throw me food, and I'd go back down and do more of the stuff. I had 11 years worth of bank records. That's a sickness that I enjoyed it. But the fact is, we got the guy, and that's all that really mattered. And that's the fun of it. I love putting puzzles together. So for me, the second best part, too, is I get to interview people. I loved being a hostage negotiator. One of the things that was great was you took those skills into the interviewing. Sometimes you just got to tell the person jump, because they're not going to do it. Okay? All right? And you're not, folks, in the first 5 minutes whether they're going to kill themselves. It's the same thing with when you're interviewing in forensic accounting. You know whether they're going to tell you or not in the first 5 minutes, just by what they say. And basically, we're telling them to jump at that point in time in the interview. And the majority do. But it's all how you do it. Anybody got any questions? Sir?
How does financial crimes differ in Miami, say, compared to the rest of the country?
Well, Miami is its own little world, okay? You think of it like this, and I'll just put it like this. We call Fort Lauderdale Fraud Lauderdale, okay? Every major fraud that happens either starts here or Miami. The difference is because Miami's population is bigger and a little bit more transient, they see more, like the volume's higher. We see the same crimes. And that's really the difference, okay? Volume-wise, like where I had 9 people at one time, they have 40 people working it, okay? And they broke it up into 3 sections, like north, south, and central. And, the crimes are the same though, because it used to be, years ago when I first started, and I had dark hair and I could remember, people didn't cross the county lines that much to commit a crime. It's a different criminal now. They don't care. They don't look at boundaries. So, it's kind of like when you think about waves, like for instance, the mortgage fraud started in Miami and then moved here. But identity theft started here and went to Miami. So, we always argue this with the guys from Miami. No, you got mortgage fraud, but we had identity theft, okay? But they're the same crimes. The difference is the volume and when you talk about the amount of people, But the groups, they don't go, oh, wait, we're here in Fort Lauderdale, so we can't do it here. They don't care. So they're very transient now. Okay, and then some of them are traveling groups. They don't put on a show that night. They just go out and steal stuff. Like Felony Lane, for instance, started here, never really got caught on that great in Miami, and went to Orlando, Jacksonville, Tampa. They stayed out of the center of the state. I don't know, maybe they thought they were going to get eaten in the center of the state if they got caught. I don't understand why. But I think it's because the I-95, I-75, 27 is really, you can get caught on there if you understand what I mean. There's no good egress and ingress. And they moved to Texas. I mean, Felony Lane went all over the country and even into Canada. Okay? So I think what happens is it depends on what groups. Now, for instance, if you talk about, and this does fall under it, fraud, shoplifting, for instance, there's a group, the South American group that came up and were in Miami. They didn't really come up into Broward until just recently. So it just depends. I mean, it depends on the crime, too. Yes, ma'am.
What's your advice for getting started in the field? Like, other than education, once you have the degrees and the certificates, what's your best advice to get started?
I would say the
working?
best advice is you're never going to start on the top, start at the bottom, start to learn, get the education, and go for it. Oftentimes, look, people used to ask me this, I want to be, and I'd love this, I want to be CSI, Well, yeah, but CSI looks good on TV, but reality is they all started out as cops, road patrol. You got to start out somewhere, and it's usually not in the best spot. Auditor General's office, the state, they have fraud investigators, Medicare fraud investigators. Okay, there's so many of them. Many of our students are working for the state agencies, and then they're like going to different, like private after a while. So it just depends on where you want to work. If you go on like was it Sunbiz? Not Sunbiz. Florida has the Attorney General's office. You start looking at that. A number of our students recently wound up going to the finance. I can't think of it. They're like the auditor, but there's a name for it.
Department of Financial Regulation.
Thank you. I just couldn't think of it. And they went there. Some of the people have went to the county. It just depends on where you're going to go. The problem with like the sheriff's office is the people in my old unit are all sworn now. I used to swear at them a lot, but not, they're all certified officers. Okay. The state's attorney was talking about building it up, but due to funding, I know that at one point, I think the FBI has started looking at, they don't want to make agents, but what they want to do is have forensic accountants. Homeland Security is looking for people. It depends. Do you want to move? Do you want to stay here? Okay, and that's the other thing. DEA looks for people like that. Even Food and Drug Administration. I mean, when you think of any federal agency, they all have people within it. Okay, the Department of the Navy, which is out west, they were looking for people, and it's civilian. You're a civilian employee. So it's just going on and looking for what you want to do. I like being retired, though. So, anybody else? You got any questions? No?
No questions online either. So.
I hope I helped. I mean, so.
Yeah, well, we're going to wrap up. And if anybody online has any, wants any more information, you can go to accounting.fau.edu. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you. Okay. We done? I'm working on that shyness.